Good evening. This is Barron's Christian Guild coming to you once again. Today is Tuesday, October 6th, and today in this episode I'm going to be speaking about our national priorities. This particular video is being inspired by some recent articles that I've read, which are going to be noted in the links below in the info box for this episode. So I've been reflecting a lot recently on our national priorities here in this country and have found it very troubling that we are in the state that we are in today. I was reflecting on this especially after listening to a radio presentation last month, in the month of September, featuring a local child psychiatrist and pediatrician by the name of Elizabeth Pinsky. She lives here in the Boston metro area where I live, and she wrote an article recently that had appeared in the Atlantic. And the topic was basically focused on the needs for children to be able to return to school and to be able to have something that approximates a normal life. And after having read her article as well as listened to the radio presentation, I found myself reflecting on this issue. And what I have found very tragic is that once the pandemic caused our shutdowns of our state economies throughout the country earlier this year, we, in my opinion, did not sufficiently prioritize the needs of our youngest members of our society, namely our children. And the issue with that is that is a very sensitive developmental phase of life for human beings, the earliest years of our lives. And to see so many children have their lives so incredibly disrupted because of these shutdowns and the restrictions that have been placed upon all of us, we risk having significant damage done to their lives in future years and even decades, depending on how long these restrictions remain in place, how the economy ultimately continues to grow or to falter in the coming months. And so I wanted to use this opportunity in this episode to invite you, my viewers, to consider if we were to, as American citizens, come together in a consensus-building activity and seek to create a national list of priorities, what would our priorities be? Who would we decide should have first priority in terms of protecting them during this time of the pandemic? And I would argue that the people that should be protected first and foremost are our most vulnerable populations. And that includes children, that includes the disabled, that includes the elderly, that includes people with immunosuppressive conditions, which I have referenced in a previous episode. So if we were to have such a dialogue focused on our national priorities, who would we ultimately choose to protect first? And what would be the changes that we would need to make in our daily lives and in our institutions to support putting those people first in our national priority listing? I would argue that if we were to do that in accordance with the vulnerability of populations, if we were to rank our priorities and our priority populations according to vulnerability, we would have organized our priorities and our responses to the pandemic differently than how we have throughout much of this country. We would be putting our children first. We would be ensuring that our education system came first. And we would be also prioritizing the survival of those who have the least resources among themselves, the poor, the homeless, and other people like that. So I invite you to take a moment, having listened to this very brief video, to consider what would be our national priorities if we were to actually create one through an act of consensus building? How would we alter our daily lives as individuals, as communities, also on the level of states and even the federal government? How would we change our focus, and what would we do differently? And I personally argue that we do need to create a set of national priorities. We need to engage in consensus building rather than engage in the current political rhetoric and unkindness that has become part and parcel of so much of what we see in Washington, D.C. these days. So, I wish to leave you this evening to reflect on that. And this notion of national priorities will be a part of my content in upcoming episodes as well. So I welcome you to continue to tune in. I will do my best to continue to create informative and interesting content. So thank you again for tuning in, and I will be here once again in the near future. Thank you.